Welcome back. It's the Marketer of the Day podcast. Dr. Gena Cox, Ph.D. is here, and Dr. Gena is an organizational psychologist, executive coach, speaker, author. She helps leaders grow profitable businesses by building respectful work cultures using psychological insight. So Dr. Gena is going to be telling us today about her excellent book, Leading Inclusion, and possibly about her RESPECT ethos framework, which empowers leaders to drive connection, collaboration, and innovation. Her thought leadership has been featured in Harvard Business Review, Fast Company, and Forbes. And so Gena is here to tell us about respect in the workplace. What's the big deal with that? How it works in the context of leadership, how it leads to better growth, more money, better organization, all these wonderful payoffs, dividends. So Dr. Gena, glad to be speaking with you.
Oh, it's great to be here, Robert. It's been fun getting to know you over the years, and I'm delighted to be a guest on your podcast.
Yeah, and that's always what's fun about the internet, and especially social media, LinkedIn, YouTube, podcasting, is like you see a person over many years, and it's like watching an actor or a talk show host or radio DJ. You get to know someone, and it goes both ways because I've been seeing what you've been doing, and so there's the mutual respect there. And so to get everyone else acquainted with who you are, what you're all about, what's your current focus and passion?
My current focus is the same focus I've had, I guess, throughout my entire professional career. I'm an organizational psychologist, and my focus has always been helping leaders build healthy organizations in which, you not just get things done, but people end up leaving at the end of the day when they go home, they feel like they had a good experience in that their workplace hasn't made their lives worse. And that's still my mission, but for the last several years, I've really focused more specifically on helping leaders build respectful organizations. Because you know what? I realize that most leaders want to have the healthiest kind of environment that they can create, but they just don't know where to begin. And so it occurred to me that perhaps I can just share, using psychological science, some basic ideas that people could remember and perhaps implement in their organizations.
Very nice. Well, I'm excited to get to those ideas with you. And I think that this is a really important subject, and it requires, I think, some abstract thinking, and it might even involve years of like unlearning and relearning stuff. The idea that people are important, right? And I know that when I was younger, when I was a teenager, I was just like, okay, what's the work? What are the tasks? Who's doing what? And then maybe in like the older, kinder years, you think, okay, well, I don't like to be spoken to a certain way or treated a certain way, or to be kind of like bullied or forced into something. And we've definitely seen the bad, toxic workplace environments, and then also where everyone is just nice and everyone encourages people. And I think that all these leaders that you mentioned would love to create and to be in a place to work where everyone's excited, right? Everyone wants to be there. And so how do we go about doing that? You mentioned that some people don't even know the first step to starting this.
Yeah, I do think I give leaders the benefit of the doubt. I think any person who takes on a leadership role wants to do well in that role. That's my fundamental belief. And I also feel that sometimes, especially in the more sophisticated leadership roles, that sometimes leaders have been poorly taught. Like they have been taught some ideas that really aren't going to work, or they haven't been taught at all how to be effective leaders. So I just make the assumption that everybody wants to do the right thing and to have healthy work cultures. But you made one of the most important points already, which is that everything that happens in business, I always encourage leaders to think about like a donut, or you can think of like a pizza, but think about a donut. So think about all the things that you do in your job as a leader. Let's say they all fit into this circle, right? And so, for example, that in this job, there's going to be some marketing and there's going to be some sales stuff that you have to do, and some, development of the product or what have you, all of that stuff that goes into running this business. But you also know that somewhere there's this human component. There are humans that have to actually think about things. There are humans that have to do the things. There are humans that have to interact with your customers and your clients, and your suppliers are human. Like there's no escaping the human element. But the funny thing about it is most people don't think about how that human element is always present. So when I think about performance as a leader, right, I say, first of all, if you think about it like a pie, there's some proportion of your success that's going to depend on getting the tasks done, right? Let's call it 50%. 50% of the circle is getting the tasks done. The other 50% is working with people and helping those people be their best so they can produce the thing that you want. You can't avoid that percentage. But let's take that same circle and change it around and put it in a different way. Let's imagine then that we had more of like a donut kind of thing where you have a big circle and a smaller circle in the middle. I think about the fact that all the things you do, marketing, sales, whatever, constantly touch the people part. And then in the center of that donut, then let's imagine that that's where the people are. That everything that you're doing, at least the tip of it, of that piece of pizza, is touching that center part of the donut. Then you remember that it doesn't matter what you're doing, it's always a part of that. And then one more way of thinking about this is, let's say you had a circular cake. You had a cake with different layers, but all the goodies are in that cake. And every time you take a slice of the cake, you want to have a piece of all of it, right? So when you slice that piece of cake, somewhere in one of those layers of all the chocolate and ice cream or whatever you have in your cake, there's going to be humans in there. I'm kind of overstating the point, but the main idea that I think a lot of leaders miss is that it's really important to remember that, how much the humans are part of everything you do. And on top of that, important to remember that you've got to think about the humans from the very beginning, because if you do not do that, you end up making a lot of mistakes and you don't typically have the success that you seek.
That's huge. And I think it's kind of a magical concept, right? When you think about the way that people interact with you and respond with you. Like, I come from a software background. And so when I was younger, I was like, hey, functions and inputs and outputs and arithmetic. And then you get into these things like software architecture or software design, and how they say like Apple creates like these beautiful looking phones and these beautiful interfaces. And it takes something that is kind of the hard work and just getting things done to like the fun and the beauty of it, right? Like, how will people put this software to use, and where will they get frustrated, and how do we maybe account for the dummy proofing of it and making sure it works and iterating? And it's kind of a cool concept, right? But it requires working different parts of the brain than maybe we're used to with the straightforwardness. And so if when you go about and saying, okay, you look at this organization and it has all these things wrong. Is there like a low hanging fruit when you're looking to like improve the respect or make the communication better? Do you see anything that's like done the wrong way quite a bit?
Well, the low hanging fruit is that the respect piece is often missing. So you mentioned technology, and I've worked with a lot of technology organizations, and there's a lot of pressure often to get something done within a certain window of time. That tends to be the pattern. We need it we have this plan for the next 6 months. We got to do this thing in the next 6 months, or even the next 3 months, or whatever that window is. That kind of pressure, it makes sense in terms of competitiveness. You're thinking, I got to get it out. But that puts a lot of pressure on the humans who are trying to get the thing done. And so what tends to go out of the window in that environment is that people feel like it is okay to not bother to be respectful. Like you can forget about it for now, because we're so busy focused on getting this thing out the door. We don't have time for the niceties. We don't have time to thank people and to acknowledge them and empathize. We don't have time for that. We just need to get this thing out. And so after a while, a pattern gets established where people are like 100% heads down, and they think it's actually okay. Sometimes you'll hear people say, oh, this person, I know they're going to get it done. I don't care too much about, the fact that, maybe some people call them a jerk or whatever. That doesn't matter to me, because you know what? They're the best developer we ever had. So when you hear something like that, you already know people get rewarded for the bad behavior. And then the positive behavior is not even thought about. It's not even encouraged. So that's one of the reasons why I focus on telling leaders and members of teams, the one thing that you should always keep in mind is that no matter who you're working with, people want to feel respected. And what do I mean by that? People simply want to feel seen, heard, and valued. That's the definition of respect in the simplest way. And being seen is like, when I show up, I just want you to acknowledge my humanity. Right? That's all I want. I just want to feel like when I'm in your presence, you remember there's a human here, right? Being heard is about having some space to express your ideas, the feeling that if you offer an idea, people will recognize that this idea might have some value, and that if they use the idea, they'll give you some credit, and you can feel like, I'm a part of building this important thing. And then valued is, like it sounds, it's not just a paycheck. Everybody is going to get a paycheck, what people really want when it comes to feeling valued is they want that sense of sort of being recognized when they do something. They want to be thanked. They want to have this idea that they will know when there are opportunities and that they can have a chance to be, to maybe explore those opportunities. And they want visibility. Everybody wants visibility. I don't mean being on camera. I just mean they want to feel like I'm important in the big scheme of things. That stuff about respect is what's often missing. And it's missing because we're all so busy. We're trying to get the thing up the door. We're trying to hit the deadline. And we don't realize that in the middle of all of this, there's a human. No matter how they look, no matter how they dress, no matter how rich they are, how poor they are, this is what they really want. And when they don't get it, they're less likely to engage and be sort of collaborative, and give you the innovation, support the innovation that an organization needs.
Well, this is a great message that people need to be seen, heard, and valued. And you imagine that if we're in a rush to get things out the door and we don't pay attention to people's feelings or don't make them part of the team, then that we think that gets us by once, and then that becomes a habit, right? They say how you do anything is how you do everything, and that's really not a good place to be. Like, I love this idea of respect. I looked it up just now. It's due regard for the feelings, wishes, rights, or traditions of others. And so, and you're making me think of, like, I had my son in soccer a few months ago, and he's just like a little guy, the first year in soccer, you don't do very much, right? You don't do so well. You're lucky if you kick the ball. And
Right.
then so there was kind of all the other kids who had been at it for like maybe a year or two, and he was brand new. And so he was kind of left out. But that coach, he made sure to like check in with us. He made sure, just even though there's like, as parents, not much to be done, right? Kid doesn't want to play, not having fun. He does what he wants, but the coach was still there, just like checking in with us, talking to him, talking to us. And even though it didn't make a difference as far as the outcome, I felt like a heck of a lot better versus if he didn't know or didn't pay very much attention to us. And so you said that you had some kind of a framework, and I'm really curious to know about that because you're Miss Ph.D., right? You're Miss Education. So can you educate us as far as what kind of transformation needs to happen in the workplace?
So I mentioned that, respect is something that people have to think about. But I shared a definition that is very simple because I know that if I gave you the most complicated psychology definition of respect, you'd never remember it. You'd never be able to do anything with it. So hopefully you can remember seen, heard, and valued. But then the next question becomes, well, what are behaviors? What is it that I need to do so that I can show respect to other people? Because respect is one of those two-way things. Like if you don't show respect, you're never going to get it. If you are the leader, don't model respect, the people on your team are never going to behave that way. So there are really some behaviors that a person can do that will sort of communicate this feeling of respect without waving a flag. They just do these behaviors. And conveniently, those behaviors fall into a pattern called respect, using the first letter of each word of the word, as to create that framework. So respect, RESPECT. The first letter is R, which is to recognize. People want to feel recognized for whatever it is that they're doing, even if it's a little thing like a young man on the soccer field learning how to play. And the first time he kicks the ball, even though the ball only goes 2 inches, getting that recognition, that reinforcement is going to be building this respectful interaction. Another one is empathize. There's a quote about empathy that I really like. And that quote is something like, what empathy really is recognizing that someone else's experience or someone else's world is as real as your world. That's what people mean when they say empathy. So people just want to have a sense that you're tuning into them, so you understand what they're going through, and that what they're going through is important, even if you don't get the whole thing, right? So it's definitely recognition, empathy, and then sharing. In the workplace, it's really important that people get accustomed to the idea that when you're working together on a team, it's not just what you know, it's how can you share that information with others or share something that you understand to help the team, sort of grow and thrive. An example of this would be in my work as a consultant, when my clients would ask me a question for which no answer existed in our consulting organization, I would write up a few paragraphs and send it to the client. The client would be delighted because they got their answer. But then I would take that thing I wrote up and I would share it with the other consultants in the consulting organization that I was a part of, so they don't have to reinvent the wheel. And after a while, they just would say, well, you know what? if I don't state in the book, let me just check with Gena just in case she's writing it up because she might know this thing. And so the benefit of sharing is that it always comes back to you in that positive way, but it helps the entire team to grow. Partnering is also related to that because the sharing and the partnering, which is like supporting another person as they're trying to get the thing done, like the other child that might come to your son and give them a pat on the back or just say yay or attaboy or whatever little things coaches say. They don't say those things just for the fun of it. They say those things because they're trying to show you that we're in this thing together. So partnering is really important. And then there's empower. Empower is exactly like it sounds. You've got to give people space so that they can sort of try things, make mistakes, not be criticized or have their heads cut off when they make those mistakes, but have some sense that they can put some effort in and see how things work out. So that's empower. Celebrate. No, I don't think I need to say a lot about this. People want to feel like they're celebrated for whatever. It's amazing. The reason companies sometimes do like birthday celebrations and things like that is mostly because they understand kind of at the gut level that people like to feel, that sense of like it's about me for these 10 minutes. But people just want to be celebrated all year in the smallest, simple ways. And the very last thing in my framework is thank. Um, most of us go through the day doing a variety of things. And as we're doing these things, we realize that there's only a certain percentage of people in the world that actually thank us for the things we do. Some people are thankers and some people apparently are not thankers. And I always notice that difference and think, gosh, I didn't do it for the thanks, but how come you couldn't say thanks? People like to be thanked. We got to get accustomed to thanking people. So this whole respect idea is about these behaviors and the things that our people can just build into their everyday lives. It's not a separate project, but just practicing those behaviors.
Very nice. And I think it definitely pays to overcome your default programming and to like you if you're not a thinker to just go do that extra effort and run through that list so that way you can put out different actions into your workplace and get different results back. And we've all been in that situation where everyone's kind of doing their best and wants to be better, but then there's the one there's the toxic high performer. And a few months ago I was on a Zoom call with a client and she kind of had her team there and everyone was great, but there was the one guy and you could tell almost instantly that he was the person that we were all just kind of walking on eggshells around him, and it seemed to be working for him, right? Because here's all of us putting in maximum effort, he's putting in minimum effort, he's kind of rewarded for that bad behavior. So what do you think can be done in that kind of situation where it feels almost like the relationships are locked in or one person doesn't want to change and you can't really get them out, and it might even be kind of harsh to get them out? What can be done in a difficult situation like that?
Yeah. There's a lot of talk about toxic work environments, and it's exactly what you described is exactly an example of that. To me, a toxic work environment is nothing more than a disrespectful work environment. And so my word for what we're going to talk about now is I want people to have roxic in cultures. Instead of toxic, let's make them roxic, right? Respectful. So what I tell leaders is if you look around and think about who are the one or two people with whom you spend most of your time, to whom you give most of your attention, or maybe even the people that you consider to be your superstars. Okay, tell me who those are. Tom, Dick, and Harry. Okay, we got the names. Think a little bit about those people. Now tell me, what is it that they do that you really like? Oh, top producer, always brings you new clients, generates new ideas. Fantastic. Okay, now tell me, what do you know about how Tom, Dick, and Harry interact with the people with whom they work, their colleagues, their co-workers, their customers, and so on. And tell me how do people like them? Tell me what those relationships are like. They'll say, oh, yeah, you know who they are. They're stars. So, yeah, sometimes they step on toes. Sometimes they get a little loud and they push people a little bit, but, they always get results. So the minute that they start that part of the conversation, because this always happens, they always tell me that their top performing people are their highest producers, especially when you hear the word producers in the sales environment. The leaders always tell me, I know they have some bad behaviors, but we tolerate them because they're superstars. So now I say, let me tell you what you just told me. You just told me that you have people in your organization who abuse other people with whom they interact every day in these ways, blah, 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 blah. But you tolerate that because you think that what matters most is that you get some money out of this at the end. That's what you just told me. Is that true? Well, I didn't say that. I didn't mean that. Well, that's what you just told me. Is that what you want? How do you think other employees perceive that? How do you think your customers perceive that? Okay, you know what? This is probably not good in the long run. Okay, well, what can we do differently? I try to get leaders to start thinking about this not just as the individual, but as the individual within a whole ecosystem, because everything that any employee does touches their coworkers, their managers, their leaders, their customers, their suppliers, any other entity within the system. So I have a conversation like that, and then I say, okay, now tell me three things that you could do differently starting right now with these three people that are your top performers. And they'll tell me three behaviors. They'll say, you know what? The next time that someone comes to me and tells me that this person did this thing, even though, and that, they didn't like it, instead of telling them, um, you know how Tom is, he doesn't mean anything by that. Instead of protecting Tom, what I'm going to do is say, thank you for sharing that with me. I'm going to make sure you don't have to deal with this again. And I'm going to talk to Tom. And I'm going to change the way, because I've never told Tom that he was wrong about these things, right? Tom has been doing this for 10 years. So that's one behavior I'm going to change. Okay, well, tell me a second behavior. Tell me something you could do differently. They'll tell me a second and a third. And then I say, I'm going to hold you accountable for those three behaviors. I talk to them again in a couple of weeks or 3 weeks, and I say, have you changed any of these behaviors? I mean, you can see that what I'm saying here is, I'm a coach, right?
Yeah.
Ultimately, that's what I am, right? And coaching is nothing magical except to the extent that you can get the person that you're coaching to think about what are they doing and what do they need to do differently in order to accomplish a particular goal. So I just have to get people to think about the goal differently, because the goal is not just to have the high performers producing. The goal is to have high performers producing in an environment in which everybody who's part of that ecosystem feels healthy at the end of the day.
I love it. And you mentioned that this word tolerate, and I think it's a bad word, right? Tolerate means that we're kind of like we're like a little bit miserable, we're putting up with this extra baggage. And I love your thought process here of turning it on its head, right? Because someone
Yes.
might just be thinking, oh, well, I don't want to ruffle feathers by pointing this out to this person or getting them to change their behavior. And you're
Mm.
saying, yeah, but you're letting this behavior continue, you're letting others know that it's okay. And it seems like from the way that you're explaining this, perhaps we tell ourselves stories just to keep the autopilot going, right? We say, hey, well, this is
Yeah.
how it's going on. This person's this top performer, and I'll leave them alone. And your I don't know, opposition to the kind of being stuck in the story is to ask these pointed questions, right? You say,
Absolutely.
hey, who are the top three people? What are the top three things that you like? What are three things you can start doing to kind of just like pick this apart and break our patterns and get us to do something better? And so all of these things that you're telling us, they make a lot of sense. And it seems like in order to apply the deliberate effort, we have to say, well, hey, here's the practical, but there's also this more like abstract that I have to like know that it has a benefit, right? I brush
Mhm.
my teeth every day, and I don't wait to get the cavity first. It's just this thing I say, hey, I know I need to do this. And if not, something bad will happen months from now. And so I do this for now. And so I know that you do a lot of the social posting and the speaking and the talking about the subject. And do you ever sometimes like second guess yourself in the same way someone might second guess the respect behavior? It's easy to tell yourself, I don't have time for the content, the social posting. What are your thoughts on that? Just on this whole idea of doing the activity where like the goose that lays the golden eggs come from, but it's kind of like counterintuitive, right? It's kind of like the extra publicity. How do you rationalize that?
Yeah, that's the funny thing about life, though. There hardly is anything that I know of that you can do it once. It's like an on and off switch. You turn it on and now magic happens, right? For most things in life, it's a process. You got to do it. You got to do it more than once, and you have to do it even when you don't see the immediate results. And by the way, with regard to respect, there is a direct connection between respect and things like profitability, whether employees turn over or not, people who feel disrespected and so on. So there's actually, it's abstract, but there's actually a direct link documented in the data. But in my own work, I do know that sometimes there are things that I do, and you mentioned, for example, marketing. I have to do marketing in my job. It's not. I was one of the kids that didn't even want to sell Girl Scout cookies. I didn't like the door to door. I didn't like asking for the money. I still don't like those kinds of things. So this is not something that comes naturally to me. However, it goes back to how we started the conversation. If I want to be holistically successful, there's some parts of my job that I don't like that I still have to do and do them consistently. And so I do them, right? Whether it's social posting or whether it's you know, uh, writing articles or things, some of which are things that fall into the category of if I didn't do them, I would probably still make a living. But when I do them, I am able to elevate my status in different ways, right? Certainly my credibility, certainly my visibility, and certainly the extent to which people feel that they understand me, which is a very important thing, right? And part of the reason I do it. Those three things that I get from these other activities that fall into the category of you could call them marketing, although I like to call them thought leadership because it sounds better, but it's all the same ultimately. But they matter so much that I do put a lot of effort into them. Whether I'm good at it or not is another matter, because I have to let people get to understand a little bit about me if I want them to listen to anything I have to say. And whatever job you have, I think all of us have these things that we do, and at first we don't necessarily like them or love them. I have come to appreciate the full value of that kind of work in my practice, in my work, and I do it in a way that pleases me. And I'm truly, my objective with all of it, my biggest objective really, is so that when people do see me show up, they say, oh, I know who Gena is. I know what she thinks. I have a sense of her style, and they can trust me. That is an important thing that can only be accomplished for me through some of these mechanisms.
So you're saying credibility, visibility, and understanding, and that's
Mhm.
great. So when someone searches you, they see that you've spoken about all these topics, you solve all these problems, and maybe they already do know you just from being around on social media. So they are primed already to have this kind of conversation. And if there's this one of these organizations that say, hey, we need better leadership, we need more respect, then Gena is our person. We said that on LinkedIn, you're at GenaCox, and your website is genacox.com. And as far as someone kind of falling under this spell that we're talking about, for someone to say, hey, I love what Gena had to say on that podcast. She's someone that I need to reach out to. How does somebody know if they're the correct person to get your book or to contact you for some speaking opportunities?
I mean, I would say you're the correct person to work with me. If you're somebody who has a vision for your business, whereby you don't just want to say that you're sort of pushing people forward to get something done, but you'd love to be in a situation where when you could believe that when you are not in the room, virtually or physically, the people who work for you are moving forward to get things done, and they're doing it together. And at the end of the day, they just have this experience. When they go home and talk to their loved ones, they say, "Man, I today was such a good day. I worked with Robert, and I had to work with Susie, and it's so nice to work with them because they don't make my life harder." Versus a situation I often encounter where a lot of employees go home at the end of the day and say to their loved ones, "Oh my God, you would not believe what I had to deal with today. You could not believe what this person did." Those kinds of, if you're wanting to have that more positive experience in your workplace, I can help you because I can help you think about what you can do, what levers you can push or pull to help create that environment where things can be more positive for everybody.
It reminds me of camping, where you can either go camping and leave a lot of garbage, or you can pick up your own garbage and maybe even take some of the other garbage with you, right? Leave it a better place than where you left it. And you already demoed for us some of these skills and tools that you can use to kind of poke and prod and change up the equation and make people exist in a better workplace where they love to work. They love to be there. They go home, they tell their families about their experiences. We all want that. And so, how can someone get that? What are some next steps as far as reaching out to you?
Yeah, as you mentioned, I'm always on LinkedIn, so you can definitely connect and also reach out to me on LinkedIn messaging because I will definitely respond. Visit me on my website to learn some additional ways that you can get a hold of me. If you're interested in knowing more about the respect concept and want to get additional materials about that, you can also go to www.genacox.com/25ways. genacox.com/25 ways. And there I have a little handout that just tells you a little bit about reminding you about these behaviors and helping you practice them on a daily basis.
An excellent resource, because the first step, you listen to a podcast and if a few ideas get you perked up and you say, hey, I know I need to change my ways, but as far as actually putting it into practice, getting the homework assignment, that's why we need to go to genacox.com/25 ways to get that document of 25 ways anyone can help build a culture of respect at work, because inclusion is employee experience and respect can power inclusion. And so as we're headed there, genacox.com/25 ways, it's time to stump you a little bit, put you on the spot. I know that you're a seasoned speaker and podcast guest here, Gena. And what I like to do with my guests is ask them for a fun quote or lesson that has served them that they can pass on to others. So I am stumping you, putting you on the spot, but what do you have to say about a quote or lesson that has helped you that you can pass on to us?
Oh my gosh.
And it can be one of your quote or lessons if you want to.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I was thinking a little bit about how I'll tell you that there are a lot of business leaders that I admire. I mean, I would never want to be a CEO, because a CEO is somebody who has to sort of be the ultimate multitasker, have their finger in every pie at all times, and still somehow make decisions and move forward. I don't know how they do it. Very difficult job. And there's one CEO that I really admire. Well, of many, but one I really admire is Mary Barra, who is at GM. And what I want to talk about and share with you is this lesson, this quote from her that always inspires me. And she says that success is always a team effort. You must earn the respect and trust of the people you lead. That means being open, seeking solutions, and often listening more than talking. Because people don't care what you know until they know that you care. I love that quote for obvious reasons. It's one that encapsulates everything that we have been talking about. Effective leaders and are the ones who let the people who work with them believe that they care about them.
I love it. There's a lot built into that. Earn your employees' respect and trust. And the first step to doing that is by following Gena Cox on LinkedIn. Click that connect button, click that send message button. Tell her what your current problem is. Tell her you heard her on the podcast, and genacox.com/25 ways to get that free copy and begin building a culture of inclusion by fostering workplace respect. genacox.com/25 ways. Gena Cox, it's been wonderful speaking with you.
Oh, it really has been delightful. Thank you for having me, Robert.